Hello, my name is Mark Bartek. Welcome to Focus's Day of Mission, Prayer, and Giving. We're really excited to be able to provide you, our supporters, with a couple of the resources and insights that Focus has learned over the last 23 years of ministry and mission experience, and how we're helping people to renew their faith. And we hope that this is enriching for you and for your family as well in your own walk in faith. Just really excited to have with me today Leah, Nielsen, and Josh Santo, who are leaders within Focus's Freedom Project, as Focus seeks to help students and others live within the big three, which is chastity, sobriety, and excellence. Leah, Josh, would you mind telling me and telling our supporters a little bit about yourself and maybe how you got involved with the Freedom Project in terms of leadership and helping to walk with others?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I was a campus missionary for 5 years. And in the midst of that 5 years, there was just a lot that happened, a lot of miracles. But there's also just a lot of human formation that happens in your time on full-time mission. So there were different seasons of my own life that I found, I think I need a little bit more support than I've historically been accustomed to. Where do I go? Because I'm supposed to be the expert on how to imitate Jesus, and I don't feel like I can do that very well right now. So I got in contact with the Freedom Project through my friend Tori, and she just helped to walk with me kind of in an unofficial mentorship capacity to be able to get the help and resources that were appropriate for the seasons of my life. And then when I decided to transition off of campus, I still wanted to work for Focus, so still feeling a draw to mission. And so it's a natural segue into working for the Freedom Project. So now I get to work with those missionaries who are in the trenches on campus and maybe experiencing their own level of frustration or struggle or maybe difficult emotions for the first time in their life, or there's things coming up from their past that they're like, I don't think I'm equipped to deal with this. I can now connect them with other counselors and other resources for this season.
That's beautiful.
That's awesome. I was on campus as well for 5 years. And then I took over our recruitment department here. So I worked with hiring all of our on-campus missionaries. And a common theme that I kept seeing is so many men struggling with the common issue of chastity, among other things. But chastity being a really big hurdle for many of the men that we were working with. And we were doing some things for this, trying to learn. I know when I was on campus, I was trying to find different programs or different things that were out there to help these guys that were struggling, and nothing I could find was really the ticket. And during recruitment, we kept having these guys come through that have been working with Focus for years, but this still was a struggle. These are good men, prayerful men that still just were struggling. And a good friend of mine and mentor, Father Sean Kilcawley, has kind of mentored us in the Freedom Project of building up this three-legged stool, which I think we'll probably get into later, that helps men and women, but helps them not only understand why I'm struggling with what I'm struggling with, but also some of that underlying stuff. Maybe it's from past trauma or just difficulties in their childhood or bad relationships. And helping them understand some of those things so they can move forward with their life and give this over to God so that they can be more free and full to serve the Lord here. And so took over the Freedom Project after 4 years doing recruitment, and so we've been doing this for 3 years, and we're just seeing tremendous fruit, seeing a lot of men come alive and women come alive, and also just seeing a growth in maturity overall for a lot of the staff that we work with, which is really beautiful to see happen.
That's really awesome. I'm really just grateful to you both for your willingness to invest in and mentor staff and students and beyond, and just the impact that it's having. So I'm sure many of our supporters have probably heard their missionaries talk about the big three or reference it when they first encountered a missionary. Just tell me a little bit about the big three and why the big three, and what is Focus's approach to kind of encountering and helping people in regards to these big three as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I can. So the big three are chastity, sobriety, and excellence. And those are the three virtues that are hardest to live out on a college campus. We're all familiar with like the traditional college stereotypes, particularly if you're in Greek life or if you're an athlete in college. They're even more difficult to live out because of the culture surrounding those two things. And I get it. I was in a sorority. I am the first person to tell you some of those stereotypes can apply and a lot of them don't. But Focus wants our staff and our students not only to be in love with Jesus, but to be able to imitate him on their campuses or wherever their life takes them after college or after Focus. And so these are the three things in particular, even while we're interviewing our staff, these are the three virtues that we specifically ask about. And they're also, I mean, this is just my experience, chastity, sobriety, and excellence are some of the least understood virtues as well. They can just seem like a negative or oppressive thing if you don't live them well. But if you understand what they're for, they're meant for the whole flourishing of the human person.
I like that, the flourishing of the human person. I mean, when you think about the flourishing of the human person and the particular challenges that come along with someone attempting to live a chaste, sober, and excellent life, what does true human flourishing look like in this regard?
I think a really important note here that I've seen, and Leah kind of touched on it, is a lot of the times we spend most of our effort trying to stop doing a bad thing, rather than looking at the virtue, which I know when this idea was kind of presented to me, it was just opened up my mind to this, because I always thought of chastity as don't do bad things with your body, and but instead having real chastity actually is this ability to be free, that I can freely give of myself back to the Lord, and to others around me. And I think, to get into this a little bit with sobriety as well, is that it's not, hey, don't get drunk. It's so much more than that. This idea of sobriety is maintain control of who you are. And again, it constantly comes back to this idea of being a gift of yourself. And basically it's having virtue, especially around the big three. It really does. It relegates your ability to be a gift, or you are under control of something else, which is usually another substance, whether that's a drug, alcohol, or sex. It could be that thing. But I think this is really beautiful. What we're asking people to do is grow in chastity, sobriety, and excellence, not do bad things, but so that you can be free to give of yourself.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. It makes me think about when Jesus says, he who sins is a slave to sin. And what does it mean to be a slave? It means to be under the power of someone or something else. And I think in particular with things like the big three, chastity, sobriety, and excellence, they're pointing towards maybe the ways in which someone is not fully possessed of themselves and fully able to be a master of themselves in submission to the call of our Lord in order to follow him more closely, and to really, that reality that we're created in God's image and likeness. And what does it mean to be in the fullness of that image and likeness, and the particular challenges maybe that I'm going to guess that chastity, sobriety, and excellence are probably not a challenge only for college students, right? But what do you see, or what have you seen in your time? I'm guessing as you've entered into the Freedom Project that the blinders have come off a little bit. What are you seeing in terms of the current landscape when it comes to struggles or attacks on chastity, sobriety, and excellence in the midst of our world?
I think a couple of things come to mind just right away. The culture is really hard. And if you look at the stats, they're not great for things like, our staff are not unaffected by the culture. And they're often byproducts of broken families. So we see a lot of family of origin things that, you can love Jesus a whole lot. You can be praying a holy hour every day. You can be in regular, consistent spiritual direction. But those things are going to come out at some point. You're sitting in front of love itself. Love always desires to turn us into love. And so those things, what I've found on average and for the most part with our staff, is that they'll sit in holy hour, you know, they're a first year missionary, they're so excited, and then they'll sit in their holy hours and rage will come up because they're just like, I'm like frustrated at this thing that happened in the past. So kind of the current landscape that we're seeing is our stories affect us in our present day, even if there's not current struggles, but there's often still current struggles. We'll have coping mechanisms. So, I mean, I could give you the list of coping mechanisms that our staff have, but it's no different than you see in normal culture. So even things like compulsive shopping, or you could put gambling or social media use, or
eating a bag of Doritos when I get home from work.
Yeah, I mean, it's all there. We're not unaffected. We're like in our bodies, and we live our stories through our bodies. So even if our staff love Jesus a lot, yeah, they still have ways that they're trying, when they experience a negative emotion, trying to find a positive way to numb or ease that sensation. And then that's where Josh and I come in. We help them see, like, yeah, your story is really important, and we actually want you to be curious towards that as you're growing into another image of Jesus on this earth and on your campus.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off that is, we're meeting with our students, and as we're having these discussions about the big three, their baggage starts to come out, and then without us even knowing it, their baggage is actually connecting to my baggage that I didn't even know I really had to begin with, and so it's compounding, and then I actually don't know how to articulate the struggle I'm having and the experience that I'm going through, and so a lot of the time, all we're doing in support of our missionaries is helping them put language to what is happening inside of them. And I think that is something I've learned is how powerful that is. One of the books we recommend to especially to the men and some of the women is a quote from it that always really strikes me. It says, "Light kills lust," and that always has struck me because it's just bringing it forward and keeping it out of the dark and bringing it into the light can kill the vice sometimes. And I think it's a very helpful beginning point for a lot of people.
Yeah, I like that. Light kills lust. And the reality, I think, in particular with the counter vices of chastity, sobriety, and excellence would be things that oftentimes drag us into the darkness and keep us from being able to see those things. So when you talk with individuals who you're helping to grow in these areas, when you talk to them about light kills lust or kills any of these things, like what does the process look like for them to be able to, bring these things into the light? Because I'm sure there's a lot of shame and fear that kind of goes along with it. So how does somebody go about bringing these particular challenges into the light? If I can ask that while I put you on the spot. No. My light just turned off on me. I got a motion sensor.
That's great. Let me get into a little bit of one, you can never help somebody that doesn't want help themselves and that doesn't want change. And that is such an important piece that I have learned over my time is that I think where I've made a lot of mistakes as a missionary is that I did a lot of the carrying for the people, especially not even in a struggle, maybe even in sharing the gospel. I was the one kind of carrying the faith, if that makes sense, rather than letting them encounter the Lord and have that faith be imparted to them. It was between them and God. And I think it can be similar when we face some of our struggles, is that I see my brother and he's struggling with something and I want to help him so much. I want to be like that moment where the four friends drop their friend into Jesus' midst. They break open the roof and they set him down. I want to be that friend sometimes. But at the end of the day, if that friend that's paralyzed doesn't want Jesus' help, Jesus isn't going to heal him if he doesn't want him to. Jesus will only enter where he is welcomed. And I think that is exactly true for a lot of the people we work with, is that healing and recovery and sobriety are only going to take place in a heart that is predisposed to that is ready to receive it. And they might not know what that looks like, and that's fine, but that's faith, and that is the beauty of it. I think there's a correlation between faith and recovery with a lot of the people we work with, and we recommend through this process the three-legged stool, which is a 12-step group, which allows you a place where you can meet with others that are struggling with maybe a like-minded struggle that you can share openly with in an anonymous setting. Also, you can find a sponsor there that can help walk with you a little bit through your struggle. The second thing is finding a counselor that can also walk back into the past of your story with you, so that you can start to put language and articulation to some of those moments of trauma or woundedness or maybe some bad relationships that you didn't know how to express the struggle that you had in those. And a counselor can be really helpful there. And finally, the most important one, I think, is a spiritual director that can help navigate as you're going through these difficult moments of my past, and also the difficult struggles of my present, maybe some of the addiction or compulsive behaviors that I have that are unhealthy, and having a spiritual director walk with you through those, that bringing Jesus into those moments is so powerful. And I think we're seeing many of our missionaries, especially, that as they walk through this three-legged stool, they are seeing incredible amounts of healing in their lives through this.
Yeah, I think I would just add on to that. The three-legged stool is so imperative. We talk about two things. One is the beauty of the bottom. People have to get to their own bottom. At times they're on rock bottom, and it looks different for everyone in order to see, like, wow, actually, like, I might need a little bit more help than I thought. And I actually don't want to continue having this level of pain in my life or these coping mechanisms. And so we have to let people get there organically. We can't make them be there. And then the second thing is we can't water down the gospel, and we can't water down the charisma. We also can't water down the healing journey that we're all called to as disciples of Christ. And so when people come to me, like, let's say I have a girl call me and she's like talking about XYZ struggle or coping mechanism, and she might not use the word coping mechanism, but that's essentially what's going on. The question I always ask is, do you really believe that freedom is possible? And then if they say, no, I actually don't, first we need to work on, like, you need to get to a place where you believe that it's actually possible for you. But if you've struggled for so long, you keep falling or acting out, it can be really tempting to give up hope. And so Josh and I, part of our role is to help reinstill hope that, like, no, we can't water down this message of freedom. Total freedom is possible. And then the second question I ask is, are you willing to do whatever it takes to be free? So are you willing to allow me to suggest higher levels of intervention in your life than you might be comfortable with? Are you willing to allow people to walk with you? Are you willing to bring it to the light? Because the opposite of addiction isn't no addiction. The opposite of addiction is connection. So are you willing to bring this to people and have them walk with you? Counseling, spiritual direction, and a 12-step group are all great places to do that, because they bring you out of just your head or your compulsive behavior into relationship. And that's essentially what we do as disciples of Christ. We're trying to take off our old understandings and our old behaviors so that we can become more like Christ every day. So we essentially just do that, just in a different way, through the Freedom Project.
That's beautiful. It just weaves together so many kind of scriptural ideas in my mind as I think about kind of how did Jesus encounter people. And Josh, you mentioned it, the idea of having the 4 friends who opened the roof and let their paralytic friend down. Another is, when Jesus encountered the man who had been paralyzed for 38 years, and what's he ask him? Do you want to be healed? And his response is, when the waters are stirred up, there's no one to put me in the water. And then do you believe that I can heal you? And that's how Jesus encounters us and how he brings us through these things. We find ourselves in that place of just complete dependency, but in denial of our need to be dependent on Jesus, right? And I think I think you've referenced this, kind of the identity that someone walks from. And it makes me actually think of Joseph from the Old Testament, who, while he had been sold into slavery, had never, I don't believe that he ever really was a slave. He was in a circumstance, but he never, his identity was always, like a son of Abraham or of Israel at that time. So, yeah, it's beautiful to see that you're helping people to embrace that kind of identity that is beyond the circumstance of their particular lives, and to be able for them to say, you meant it for evil, but God always meant it for good, and he can bring that good out within this. And I'm sure you get to see not only some of the darker sides of the culture, but probably some real hopeful things that are taking place as well. Are you seeing progress with the approach, the three-legged stool, the encouragement for people to bring their challenges into the light, to find others that they can walk with? Can you just share some of the hopes that are being born through this?
Yeah, I mean, I think even I was just at a Freedom Project retreat. So both on the men's side and on the women's side, we have a few retreats a year, and just for our missionary staff, just to bring them into a confidential space where they can not only be built up in community of other women who have said, yeah, I need help, but then also they get formation from professionals in their area. And then we help set them up with next steps after the retreats. And one of the girls who is on our April Freedom Project retreat in New Jersey, she's a missionary on the East Coast. She's leaving staff. And when she joined staff, right away she heard about just sexual sobriety, and she had never encountered this before. From, as she says, she was kind of sexualized from an early age, and so she just wasn't really aware. She wasn't well formed in like what this could look like, that true chastity sets you free to love another person. So it was her first year on staff with Focus, where she started learning, particularly at the Freedom Project talks, what a life set free from these coping mechanisms could look like. So she started attending our 12-step groups. She got into counseling, she was in spiritual direction, and then just the natural rigor of missionary life all contributed to her eventually being able to kick some of her compulsive and addictive behaviors. She stopped going at a certain point because she left campus, she went home for the summer, life got hard. She started acting out again. And for a while, she was not doing anything to be able to be back in a place of sobriety. Eventually, she came to our Freedom Project retreat. And because of that, she has now experienced continual sobriety because of it. And I called her the other day and we were just chatting and catching up, and she was like, yeah, Leah, I didn't really realize that sobriety would be possible, honestly, before I heard the Freedom Project talks, because I always just kind of thought this is just going to be with me forever whenever my emotions get hard. And Jesus didn't just come to give me life and give me freedom for 6 weeks at a time or 2 weeks at a time. She's like, no, Jesus came to give me life and freedom for eternity. And thank you for not watering down the possibility that freedom from these things is possible if I do the work, which is just beautiful. And that's one story. I mean, there's a million.
It's so awesome. I could share a bunch of different stories, but I think a quick point on this, many of the men that we're working with are just awesome guys. And they have been struggling with this. Maybe their first exposure was around 4th, 5th grade. I think the average in America is probably even younger than that right now for first exposure. So to just set a standard here, most of the guys we're working with have been struggling with this since they were 5th, 6th grade. And so they're hired by Focus 10, 12 years later, that this is a struggle. Like Leah said, this is part of my life. This is who I am. This is something that's always going to be here. And time after time, seeing these guys that put the work in and really do have, and to make a point here, the men that we really see a tremendous amount of growth in, it's not the guys that are looking, oh, hey, I just want to stop sinning. I just want to stop and I just want some sobriety. It's the guys that say, Lord, here I am, and I just want you to have all of me. And they're actually surrendering their will over to God. And through that surrender and putting the work in of the program and allowing the Lord to provide real healing, there's real freedom that's taking place. And some of the things I'm seeing are men actually taking responsibility for their life, not blaming others or the situations around them, which I think are common themes across the board when it comes to young men in our culture today. And final thing I see is an overall hope and joy from many of the men that we work with. I believe that hope might be the biggest virtue that is under attack today for men, because the evil one is just trying to bring men into this place of despair and also a place of there's not a better for me. And the program and allowing myself to surrender myself to God each day, little by little, it's allowing them to not just be set free, but also have this heart filled with joy and hope.
That's really spectacular. Thank you for sharing that hope that you're seeing within students and missionaries, and I'm sure beyond, as well as we support our alumni and others. And we know that the impact of a missionary extends beyond these things. And it's just really, I think it's really encouraging to hear that, we're seeing numbers. I mean, dozens and dozens of people who maybe this has been their lived experience for quite a while, who are able to experience the freedom that comes from encountering Christ and really putting a good kind of plan in place to help them break free from that as well. Obviously, we have thousands and thousands of students who are involved with us, and we have tens of thousands of supporters who are involved with us as well. What would you offer to somebody who's not on a college campus, who maybe this is their lived experience, or maybe this is a struggle that they would have in terms of chastity, sobriety, or excellence for one of their children? Like, what advice do you offer to them when they encounter some of these things in their own life or in the lives of others? To put you on the spot.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is get curious. It's really hard to break the cycle of shame if you're constantly just saying, no, this isn't part of my life. No, like, you're not supposed to be angry. You're not supposed to feel resentment. You're not supposed to XYZ. And so I think the first thing is get curious. So, for example, on the women's side, we always tell women, like, just analyze, like, if you're having a fantasy about something, or if you're thinking about restricting food, or if you're having a hard day and all of a sudden a coping mechanism comes up that you haven't had since high school, get curious about that. It's most likely pointing you towards your past somewhere. So that's the first thing, get curious. The second thing is just talk to someone. Do the hard work of bringing things to the light, whether that's a trusted friend, spiritual advisor, counselor, possibly. I know that can be scary for a lot of people at first, but talk to someone who knows maybe a little bit more than you and see, like, what would you recommend if you were in my place and you were having these intrusive thoughts, or you were thinking about doing this thing. So getting curious and then talking to someone is a great first step, and hopefully low barrier enough. From there, we could recommend a million things. Books, podcasts, retreats. I mean, there's so many things that we could recommend. Some things that I found helpful personally, Dr. Bob Schutz runs a ministry called John Paul II
Healing Center
in Tallahassee. They have a book called Be Healed, very accessible, walks you through some just initial discovery of your story from a Catholic perspective. There are podcasts out there. They have a podcast as well, Dr. Bob Schutz does. We could recommend things like Dr. Peter Malinowski. He has a great podcast called Interior Integration for Catholics that can even just start giving you language that can be helpful. Dr. Greg Bottaro has a podcast called The Mindful Catholic. There are books to go along with all of these speakers and clinicians as well. What else?
I think those are great.
And then, depending on your level of what's going on in your life, we would always recommend, there's lots of home groups in your area for different things. So if you're struggling with lust, some compulsive behavior, particularly related to your sexuality, check out maybe a 12-step group in your area, or a phone meeting. Or if you're struggling and you're questioning your relationship to alcohol, maybe just check out if there's any AA meetings in your area and go and see if you are more alike than different. Just having the humility to say, like, if you're already asking this question, yeah, maybe take an action with it.
I think one that popped in my head is purityispossible.com is another really great. He just walks you through how purity is possible, and it's actually really helpful. It's free. Another thought I was having on this is to maybe make it a little, maybe bring in the spiritual side of things. I don't think we can underestimate the value. So especially when talking about having a significant other, like a child or maybe a spouse that's struggling with one of these areas, is underestimate the power of prayer. And I know that that's maybe the easy out that I'm having here, but Saint Monica is so powerful, and her intercession here cannot be underestimated enough. And she never saw a lot of the fruit of her prayer that she saw in her son Augustine after he had his conversion. And I think sometimes we may never see the fruit of a conversion here on this side, and that is not for us to see. And I think the Lord is challenging us when we have a loved one. Our response has to always be hope. And I just heard this beautiful line that we can never have we can never have a crisis of faith, but we can have a crisis of understanding. And I think that might be Walter Chiswick, who wrote an incredible book, He Leadeth Me, and it's an awesome book. But we can never have a crisis of faith, but we can have a crisis of understanding. And I think that that's really important when we're watching one of our loved ones go through addiction, when we watch them go through different struggles and we lose faith. But the thing is that we can't actually hang faith onto another person. We have to put that faith in God. And that is where I think our hearts really have the opportunity to expand and grow. And that's what the Lord is challenging us to here. Is when we're watching some of our friends and family go through a difficult time, is to lean on that faith and that hope. And ultimately, as those things grow, our ability to love also expands. And so I think that's a really very, very important thing to be keeping in mind.
That's quite deep. Thank you. It is. I find it refreshing to think about the spiritual side of some of these things, recognizing also, though, that challenges related to chastity, sobriety, and excellence are not spiritual challenges only. There might be some kind of historical challenge or some other unique experience that somebody has had or is having that is causing them to kind of turn towards these, as you said, Leah, coping mechanisms, how we're trying to cope with maybe the pain or the frustration or the challenge of each day's life. And I think it's really, really helpful to know that maybe the foundational first step is hope, that things can be different than what somebody has been experiencing. They can find new life, new freedom in Christ, Jesus came to set us truly free, not in some kind of masquerading freedom. And so just recognize that, as you said, talk about the three legs of the stool that can build a foundation for this new life: spiritual direction, counseling, and a 12-step program oriented towards maybe the particular area that you desire to grow in or need to grow in. It's just really, really worthwhile to be able to. My light shut off again. I don't know. It's really, really worthwhile to know that there's some practical steps that people can take or encourage others to take that can help them to find freedom in this regard. So I'm really grateful to you, Leah and Josh, for your efforts to help staff and students, as well as our supporters now, to be able to grow in freedom, and hopefully for the impact that it's going to have for our world as these people go out beyond campus and begin to live this freedom and invite others to experience a new freedom as well. So thank you for being with me today and spending a little bit of time talking about how our supporters can help others or find help for themselves as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
All right. And one other thing, Josh mentioned St. Monica had a great conversation in another video with Jessica Navin on praying for the conversion of your loved ones. She tells some great stories about St. Monica, as well as how we can help those who maybe have stopped living their faith or have chosen to live a lifestyle contrary to faith. So check that one out as well. So thank you guys very much. God bless you and good luck